It looked like just another piece of trash on the side of the road. An old, battered cooler, half buried in dirt, forgotten. But inside, a nightmare. 9 tiny puppies crammed together, their golden fur patchy and raw, too weak to cry, too cold to move. Their tiny bodies shivered against each other, desperate for warmth, for life. Someone had done this. Someone had thrown them away like garbage, left them to die. Lisa's hands trembled as she lifted the lid. Her heart pounded. Who could be so cruel, and could she save them in time? The road stretched ahead, empty and endless, swallowed by the fading mist of dawn. Lisa Thompson gripped the steering wheel, her tired eyes scanning the horizon. It was early, too early. The world was still waking up, but for her, another long day had already begun. The hum of the tires against the pavement was rhythmic, almost lulling. She had taken this route countless times before, a lonely highway cutting through the outskirts of town. It was familiar, uneventful, until today. At first, she almost missed it. Just another piece of roadside debris, nothing more than a discarded object left to rot like so many others along forgotten stretches of road. But something about it pulled at her. A battered red cooler, its lid slightly ajar, sitting awkwardly on the gravel shoulder. Her foot hovered over the brake. A whisper, soft, unspoken, pressed against her heart. Stop. Lisa's breath hitched. It wasn't a voice she could hear, but rather something she felt. A pull, deep inside, stronger than logic, louder than doubt. The same way she had felt when she knew she had to be by her mother's bedside in her final moments, or when she had turned down a job offer that would have taken her away from everything she loved. She had learned not to ignore these moments. With a sigh, she pulled over, the crunch of gravel beneath her tires breaking the morning silence. She sat still for a second, gripping the wheel, feeling the faint tremor in her hands. Why was her heart racing? It's probably just trash, an old cooler someone threw out. But she couldn't shake the unease settling in her chest. Slowly she stepped out, the crisp morning air biting at her skin. The cooler sat a few feet away, weathered and stained, its edges scuffed from being dragged or tossed. It didn't belong there. Something about it felt wrong. And then she heard it, a sound so faint she almost thought she imagined it. A whimper. Lisa's heart stopped. She dropped to her knees beside the cooler, pressing her hand against the lid. Another soft cry, weak and desperate, barely audible. Her breath caught in her throat. With shaking hands, she lifted the lid, and what she saw made her stomach drop. 9 tiny golden retriever puppies crammed together, their fragile bodies trembling. Their golden fur, meant to be soft and full, was patchy and thin, marred by strange raw spots where the hair had fallen away. Some had their eyes closed, too weak to lift their heads. Others blinked up at her, their innocent eyes filled with confusion and fear. Lisa inhaled sharply, a tight knot forming in her chest. Oh, dear God! The puppies barely moved, too weak to even react to her presence. She could see their tiny ribs, their frail limbs trembling as they tried to press into one another for warmth. The inside of the cooler was damp, stained with filth. It smelled of neglect, of abandonment, of suffering. Lisa felt her throat close up. How long had they been in here? Hours? A full day? Longer? Had someone really done this on purpose? Her fingers twitched at her sides, an overwhelming wave of emotions surging through her. Anger, sorrow, disbelief. How could anyone be this cruel? One of the puppies let out the faintest of cries, barely more than a whisper, a plea. And then, just as the horror of the moment threatened to consume her, she felt it. A warmth in her chest, gentle yet firm, a presence quiet but undeniable. Save them. Tears burned at the corners of Lisa's eyes as she exhaled, feeling an unexplainable peace settle over her. She knew this feeling. It was the same feeling that had carried her through the hardest moments of her life, the same feeling that had pulled her to this spot when she could have driven right past. God had led her here, and he was telling her what to do. Lisa wiped her eyes, her hands moving on instinct. She pulled off her jacket, gently wrapping it around the puppies. shielding their frail bodies from the cold morning air. "It's okay," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I've got you." One of the puppies, smaller than the rest, blinked weakly, its head lolling against the others. Lisa felt her chest tighten. She couldn't waste another second. Carefully, she lifted the cooler, cradling it against her as she hurried back to her car. The puppies barely reacted, too weak to fight, too exhausted to care. She placed the cooler on the passenger seat, turning the heat up as high as it would go. Her fingers hovered over her phone. Walter. She dialed before she could second-guess herself. The line rang twice before a groggy voice answered. "Lisa!" Walter's voice was hoarse, edged with concern. "It's barely 6 in the morning. What's wrong?" Lisa's eyes flicked to the puppies beside her, their tiny bodies barely rising and falling with each breath. "I need your help," she said, her voice shaking. "It's bad, Walter. It's really bad." She didn't wait for him to answer. She threw the car into gear, her foot pressing hard against the gas. The road stretched ahead of her, but this time there was no hesitation. Lisa knew exactly where she was meant to go. Lisa's hands gripped the steering wheel tightly as she sped down the empty highway, her knuckles white. The engine hummed beneath her, the sound barely registering over the pounding of her heart. Beside her, the cooler sat on the passenger seat, wrapped in her jacket, the puppies nestled inside. She stole a glance at them, her chest tightening. Their tiny bodies barely moved, their breathing so shallow she had to strain to see it. Some had their eyes closed, too weak to lift their heads. Others blinked up at her, but their gaze was unfocused, their exhaustion pulling them into a silent stillness that terrified her. Her lips trembled as she whispered, "Dear God, please keep them alive." The road stretched endlessly before her, every minute dragging painfully slow. She pressed her foot harder on the gas, her heartbeat racing with the urgency of the moment. Walter's clinic wasn't far, but it suddenly felt like the longest drive of her life. By the time she pulled up in front of Walter's veterinary clinic, the rising sun had begun to paint streaks of gold across the sky. Lisa barely remembered slamming the car into park before yanking open the door. She scooped up the cooler, her breath coming in shallow gasps as she hurried toward the entrance. The door flung open before she even reached it. Walter stood there, his grey hair disheveled, still pulling a coat over his flannel shirt. His sharp blue eyes widened the moment he saw Lisa's face, and the desperate way she clutched the cooler to her chest. "What happened?" he demanded, stepping aside to let her in. Lisa didn't answer right away. She hurried into the clinic, setting the cooler down on the examination table. Then, with trembling hands, she pulled back her jacket. Walter's breath hitched. "Oh, dear Lord," he murmured. He reached inside, his experienced fingers gently lifting one of the puppies. His jaw tightened. Lisa could see the shift in his expression, from shock to something graver, something colder. One by one, he checked them. Their skin was irritated, their fur patchy and raw. Their ribs were visible, their tiny stomachs sunken in from hunger. Some had crusted sores along their legs, signs of infection. A few were so cold that their little paws felt like ice against his hands. Walter looked up at Lisa, his gaze serious. "They've been starving for days," he said grimly, "and these wounds, some of them look like chemical burns." Lisa's stomach turned. Chemical burns. She clenched her fists, her nails digging into her palms as she tried to contain the anger boiling inside her. Someone had done this, on purpose. Walter carefully laid the puppy back down, moving swiftly into action. He pulled open a cabinet, grabbing blankets, syringes, and medical supplies. "We need to warm them up immediately," he said. "Their body temperatures are dangerously low." Lisa nodded, snapping out of her daze. She moved to help, gently wrapping each puppy in soft towels, while Walter prepped fluids. The clinic was silent except for the occasional soft whimper of the puppies. Every weak cry felt like a dagger in Lisa's heart. Walter injected warm fluids into one of the smallest puppies, his hands steady despite the tension in his face. Lisa noticed his throat bob as he swallowed hard. "They wouldn't have lasted much longer," he admitted quietly. "If you hadn't found them when you did." He didn't need to finish the sentence. Lisa felt her eyes burn with tears. She glanced down at the smallest puppy, the one that had barely moved since she found them. Its tiny body was curled up, its breathing shallow. She reached out and gently stroked its head, feeling the slight tremor beneath her fingertips. Please, God, let them survive. A tear slipped down her cheek. Walter exhaled and turned to her. Do you know who did this? He asked. Lisa swallowed hard, shaking her head. No, she whispered, but I'm going to find out. She lifted her gaze toward the window where the morning light was beginning to shine through. She closed her eyes for a brief moment and whispered, Thank you, God, for leading me here. The battle wasn't over, but they had a chance. And Lisa would do whatever it took to make sure these puppies had the life they deserved. The clinic was quiet now. The puppies lay nestled in a warm bundle of soft blankets, their tiny bodies finally still, not from weakness, but from the first real warmth they had felt in days. The IV drips slowly fed them life, while the low hum of Walter's medical equipment filled the space with a quiet sense of purpose. Lisa sat beside them, watching their shallow but steady breathing, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Despite the relief of getting the medical care, she couldn't shake the question that had lodged itself deep in her mind. Who did this, and why? Walter, who had been reviewing some lab results at his desk, finally turned toward her, his expression troubled. There's something strange, Lisa, he said, walking over to the table. I've treated a lot of neglected animals in my time, but this, he gestured towards the puppies, this isn't just neglect, it's intentional. Lisa frowned. What do you mean? Walter reached for one of the weaker puppies, gently lifting its tiny paw. Underneath, the skin was reddened and raw, the fur completely missing in certain areas. These burns, he said, his voice low. They're not from malnutrition or exposure alone. I ran a few quick tests. Some of these wounds, he traced a hairless patch on the puppy's side, look like they've been caused by chemical exposure, and others, he pointed at another spot, could be from frostbite. Lisa's stomach churned. Frostbite? She repeated, her mind racing. Walter nodded. It's not from the cold last night. It wasn't nearly cold enough for that. But if they were kept somewhere deliberately freezing, like inside an ice chest or exposed to something like dry ice, then it's possible. Lisa felt a sharp jolt in her chest. Someone had done this on purpose, not just abandoning them, hurting them. A slow anger started to rise inside her, tightening her throat. Lisa took a deep breath, pushing past the rage. I need to go back to where I found them. Walter's eyebrows lifted. Lisa, there might be something I missed, she insisted. I need to know where they came from. Walter sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. Just be careful. Lisa nodded, already grabbing her coat. Back to the scene. The highway stretched before her once more, but this time her pulse beat faster, her senses sharper. Lisa pulled onto the gravel shoulder where she had found the cooler. Now, in the full morning light, she could see the details more clearly. The dirt was disturbed. She crouched down, running her fingers over the tracks imprinted in the mud. Tire marks. Fresh. The pattern suggested a large vehicle, possibly an SUV or a truck, had been parked here recently. She moved slowly along the shoulder, following the faint indentation in the soil where the vehicle had backed up and then pulled away. The prints were deep, meaning the vehicle had been heavy, not just an ordinary car. As she examined the scene further, something caught her eye. A small, crumpled object, half buried in the dirt. She reached for it, brushing away the dust. A torn receipt, the ink slightly smudged but still readable. It was from a gas station about 10 miles down the road. Lisa exhaled, a lead. She stood, turning towards her car. But before she could get inside, a voice called out. You looking for something? Lisa spun around. An older man stood near the edge of the highway, leaning against a rusty pickup truck. He wore a flannel jacket, a baseball cap, pulled low over his weathered face. His expression was wary, but not unkind. I saw you stop here earlier, he said, nodding toward the dirt where Lisa had been kneeling. Not many folks pull over around this stretch of road unless they've got a reason. Lisa hesitated. She didn't know if she should share what she'd found. People in small towns didn't always trust strangers, but something told her this man might know something. "I found a cooler here last night," she said carefully. "Someone dumped 9 puppies inside." The man's face darkened. He let out a slow exhale, shaking his head. "Damn shame," he muttered. "But not surprising." Lisa's pulse quickened. "You've seen something like this before?" The man nodded, adjusting his cap. "Not the puppies, no, but I've seen a black SUV parked out here a few times. Always late at night, like they don't want to be seen. Big, dark-tinted windows, out-of-state plates. Gives me a bad feeling." Lisa swallowed. "Do you know who it belongs to?" He shrugged. "No idea, but I'll tell you this. Whatever they're doing out here, they ain't just sightseeing." Lisa felt a chill crawl down her spine. Someone in a black SUV had been out here before. Had they done this before? She tightened her grip on the receipt in her hand. "Thanks," she said. "I think I just found my next stop." The man nodded, watching as Lisa climbed into her car. As she pulled away from the shoulder, she glanced once more at the tracks in the dirt. Whoever had abandoned those puppies had left a trail, and she was going to follow it. The house was quiet, save for the soft crackling of a candle's flame. Lisa sat cross-legged on the floor of her living room, surrounded by warmth, yet feeling the weight of the night pressing down on her shoulders. The puppies lay in a cushioned box nearby, swaddled in blankets. The soft glow of the candlelight flickered across their tiny bodies, casting shadows on the walls. Their breathing was faint, their fragile chests rising and falling in slow, uneven rhythms. Lisa clasped her hands together, her fingers interlocked tightly. She bowed her head. "Dear Lord, please watch over them." Her voice was barely above a whisper, but in the silence of the room, it felt like the only sound that mattered. "They've suffered so much already. They've been abandoned, left to die, but I know you led me to them for a reason. If it is your will, let them survive." A deep peace settled over her heart, like the warmth of a gentle embrace. She felt it, not in words, not in sound, but in something deeper, something unshakable. "You found them not by chance. Everything happens for a reason." Lisa exhaled, the tension in her body slowly melting away. She opened her eyes, watching the soft flicker of the candlelight. Maybe it was exhaustion, or maybe it was faith, but she believed, she truly believed, that the puppies were meant to be saved. Yet even as hope filled her, doubt lingered at the edges. Would they really make it through the night? The hours crept by. Lisa refused to sleep, unwilling to leave them unattended for even a moment. She checked on them one by one, gently stroking their fur, ensuring they were warm enough, that their tiny bodies were still responding to the fluids Walter had administered. But then her breath caught. One of them, the smallest, the frailest of them all, had stopped moving. Lisa's heart dropped. She leaned closer, barely able to hear any sound. No movement, no breath. "No, no, no, please, no!" She reached out with trembling hands, cradling the tiny body in her palms. It was limp, cold, too cold. Panic surged through her. "Not like this! Not now!" Tears blurred her vision as she pressed the tiny puppy against her chest, feeling its stillness, feeling the terrifying silence where life should have been. "God, please." Her fingers curled tightly around the fragile creature as she whispered a prayer through her sobs. "I can't lose them, not after everything. Please, bring him back." She didn't know how long she sat there, her arms wrapped around the tiny body, rocking back and forth, pleading with the heavens, and then a twitch, so small, so faint, that at first she thought she imagined it. But then it happened again, a tiny, weak tremor in her hands. Lisa gasped. The puppy's chest, which had been still just seconds ago, shuddered with a weak, labored breath. Then another, and another. Lisa sobbed, holding him even closer. His eyelids fluttered, barely opening. The smallest sound, a faint, broken whimper, escaped his tiny body. It was weak, but it was there. Lisa pressed a shaking hand to her mouth, overwhelmed with gratitude. "Thank you, God. Thank you." She held the puppy against her cheek, feeling the warmth slowly returning to him. He was alive. It wasn't science, it wasn't logic, it was something greater, Something divine, she had no doubt. God hadn't abandoned them. As dawn broke, Lisa sat by the window, holding the smallest puppy against her chest. His breathing was steady now, his body warm again. She looked down at him, stroking his fur, marveling at the miracle in her hands. For the first time in hours, she allowed herself to smile. Hope wasn't lost. It had never been, and as she watched the sunlight slowly fill the room, Lisa knew one thing with absolute certainty. She would not let these puppies down. They had survived for a reason, and she was going to find out why. Lisa had barely slept. The night's events still clung to her, the miracle of the tiny puppy's survival, the overwhelming certainty that she had been led to them for a reason. But as the morning light stretched across the horizon, another feeling took root inside her, determination. Someone had done this. Someone had abandoned these puppies to die, and Lisa was going to find out who. She stood outside Walter's clinic, her fingers curled around the crumpled gas station receipt she had found near the abandoned cooler. It was the only clue she had, a timestamp, a location, a fragment of the truth waiting to be pieced together. Walter stepped out of the clinic, stretching, his expression still laced with concern. "You sure about this, Lisa?" She nodded, stuffing the receipt into her jacket pocket. "I have to know." Walter sighed. "Just be careful. Whoever did this, they're not just neglectful, they're cruel." Lisa met his gaze. "I won't stop until I find them." Searching for answers. Lisa drove through the back roads, winding past acres of open fields, rustic barns and fences that had long since started to rot. Her first stop was a small local diner, the kind where everyone knew everyone else's business. The scent of fresh coffee filled the air as she stepped inside, scanning the handful of patrons scattered across the booths. An older man sat near the window, his weathered hands wrapped around a steaming mug. He watched her approach with mild curiosity. "Morning," Lisa greeted. "I was wondering if you've heard anything about a black SUV hanging around the area." The man narrowed his eyes slightly. "What's this about?" Lisa hesitated, then pulled out her phone, showing him a picture of the puppies wrapped in blankets at the clinic. "Someone dumped these 9 puppies on the highway in a cooler. I found some tire tracks, and I think a black SUV was involved." The man's expression darkened. He leaned back in his chair, rubbing his chin. "You know, that actually doesn't surprise me." Lisa's pulse quickened. "What do you mean?" The man exhaled, glancing toward the counter, as if making sure no one else was listening. "A while back, there was an old farm out near the edge of town. Used to belong to a guy named Carter. Had a beautiful golden retriever, real sweet dog. But then the old man passed, and his son came back to take over the place. Didn't last long, though." Lisa felt a cold weight settle in her chest. "What happened?" The man let out a slow sigh. "Raymond Carter, that's his name. Didn't want the farm, didn't want the house, sold everything off as fast as he could. Didn't care what happened to any of it. But the worst part, the dog was pregnant when the old man died. And when Raymond got the place..." Lisa's breath caught. He didn't want them. A sickening realization hit her. The mother dog, the puppies. "Where's Raymond Carter now?" she asked, her voice tight. The man shrugged. "Packed up and left after selling the place. Last I heard, he's still hanging around town. Drives a black SUV. Lisa's hands clenched into fists. She had her answer. The forgotten farm. Lisa followed the road out to the abandoned Carter farm, its long gravel driveway overgrown with weeds. She stepped out of her car, the scent of damp earth filling her lungs as she approached the weathered barn. The house itself was boarded up, the windows covered in dust, a ghost of a life that once thrived here. Near the barn, she saw it, an old rusted dog chain nailed into the wooden post, the remains of a dog bed now tattered and torn, a shallow water bowl long since dried up. Lisa crouched down, running her fingers over the rusted metal of the chain. This had been the mother dog's home. Had she been left here? Had she died alone, abandoned just like her puppies? Lisa felt tears prick her eyes. She whispered, "I'm so sorry." Her gaze drifted back toward the driveway. She could see the faint indentations of heavy tires in the dirt. SUV tracks. This was it. This was where the story began, and Raymond Carter was the man who had tried to erase it. The next step. Lisa didn't know what she would say to him when she found him. She didn't know if he would admit it, or if he would even care. But she did know one thing. She wouldn't let him get away with this. She glanced at the sky, taking a deep breath. "Give me strength, Lord. I'll make this right." With that, she climbed back into her car, turned the ignition and drove toward the town. Toward Raymond Carter. Toward the truth. Lisa's car rolled to a stop in front of a run-down house on the outskirts of town. The Carter farm had been abandoned for months, but Raymond Carter had not gone far. She had tracked him down, a man who had inherited land, a house, and responsibility, but had discarded them all like garbage. The house in front of her was small, unkempt. The porch sagged, the yard overgrown with weeds. A black SUV sat in the driveway, dust-covered but unmistakable. Lisa clenched her fists. This was it. She stepped out of her car, her boots crunching against the gravel. She approached the front door, her pulse quickening. Before she could knock, a voice called out from behind her. "You lost?" Lisa turned. Raymond Carter leaned against the porch railing, a cigarette dangling between his fingers. He was in his late 40s, his face lined with age and wear, his clothes wrinkled as if he hadn't cared enough to change them in days. His eyes, dark, distant, held no warmth. Lisa took a steadying breath. "I know what you did." Raymond exhaled a cloud of smoke, completely unfazed. "Do you now?" Lisa's jaw tightened. "The puppies. I found them." That got his attention. He flicked the cigarette onto the ground, stomping it out lazily. His lips curled into the faintest smirk. "Yeah, and?" Lisa's blood boiled at his indifference. She had prepared for anger, for excuses, for denial. But this complete lack of remorse, was worse. "You left them to die," she said, stepping closer. "You stuffed them in a cooler and dumped them like trash." Raymond didn't even blink. "I didn't want them." Lisa's fists clenched at her sides. "You could have found them a home. You could have done something decent, but you chose cruelty." Raymond let out a hollow chuckle, shaking his head. "Cruelty," he gestured around him. "This world's cruel, lady. You think those puppies are special. Life chews you up and spits you out. No one cares. Sooner or later you realize you gotta cut the dead weight." Lisa felt something crack inside her. Not just anger, but something deeper. A cold understanding. It wasn't just the puppies. Raymond hadn't abandoned them because they were a burden. He had abandoned them because he saw himself in them. Lisa's mind flashed back to the words of the old man at the diner. The Carter farm, once a home, once a place filled with life. Until his father died. Until Raymond was left alone in the ruins of something that was never really his. And just like that, everything made sense. Lisa's voice softened, her anger giving way to something else. "Your father never wanted you, did he?" Raymond's smirk vanished. For the first time, his expression shifted, just slightly. A flicker of something buried, something raw. He looked away, running a hand through his unkempt hair. "What do you care?" Lisa took a breath. "I care because I know you had a choice, and you still do." Raymond scoffed, shaking his head. "Choice? There was no choice. That farm was never mine. My old man didn't even leave it to me because he wanted to. He just died before he could sell it. I was never supposed to be there." His voice turned bitter. "And neither were those damn dogs." Lisa's heart ached. This wasn't just a man who had abandoned puppies. This was a man who had been abandoned his entire life. She stepped closer. "You could have done better. You still can." Raymond let out a short, bitter laugh. "What do you want me to do? Say I'm sorry? Go back and fix it?" His eyes darkened. "Some things can't be undone, lady." Lisa studied him, searching for any crack in the wall he had built around himself. He had spent his whole life being unwanted, and now he had made others feel the same. But it didn't have to be this way. "You can choose a different path," she said simply. "You don't have to be like your father." For a moment, the silence stretched between them. Lisa saw it then, the hesitation, the flicker of something almost human. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared. Raymond exhaled sharply, shaking his head. "Doesn't matter." He turned, stepping onto his porch. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I've got nothing left to say." Lisa watched as he walked away, disappearing into the darkened doorway. He hadn't fought her. He hadn't threatened her. But he hadn't changed either, not yet. She took a slow breath, her hands relaxing at her sides. Maybe she couldn't change him. Maybe he was too far gone. But she had tried, and sometimes that was all you could do. Lisa turned back toward her car, glancing once more at the rusting SUV in the driveway. This wasn't over. Not yet. If you've made it this far, you must be wondering, will Raymond Carter face justice for what he did? Will he finally be held accountable? Or will he walk away without consequences? Tell us what you think in the comments below. Should he be punished? Should he be given a second chance? Your thoughts matter and will reveal what happens next in the next chapter of this story. Stay tuned and make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the conclusion.